Line charts are one of the most commonly used kinds of charts. Generally, they refer to progress or lack of progress over a period of time. And almost always in line charts, across the bottom, the x-axis, we see some kind of time frame. The examples here, we're seeing months, two different examples on the screen here in these two charts. Notice the lines move from point to point. It's possible to have a line chart and not have lines. That almost sounds like a contradiction, but you can focus on the markers themselves. So for example here, and I would make a strong case for saying this is a good use of it here, but if we want to change the lines, we've got a couple of options that are worth considering. In the green chart to the right, I'm going to double click the blue line. That brings up the Format Data Series to the right. By the way, when you do see these dialog boxes popping up, they're anchored typically on the right side. You can leave them there, or you can click and drag their title bars, put them out here if you wish. Or if they're out here and you later want them to move back, simply double click them. But to make this a little bit more readable, I'm going to scroll to the right so we can see the entire chart. So I've just double clicked the line here. The fill option here, the paint bucket, gives us some choices here. Here's some line options. And not so obvious because you have to scroll down to see it, is a choice called smoothed line. And sometimes this is appropriate. Watch the line. We see what's happening there. Now, if I wanted to do this to the other lines, I can simply click right here and scroll down and do the same thing there and do it for the other line. There it is again, smoothed at the bottom, and again, smooth line. So we can do that for all those if we wanted to. So that gives it a different look, a different feel as well. So what if we choose no line? Keep an eye on that blue line. We don't see any line. Now we do see the markers. We can go to marker over here and possibly increase the size of those. We've got some marker options right here. Here it looks like some kind of a star or something. We could make a diamond and possibly from size 5, make this a bit bigger. I'm making it size 9. Let me click on the chart and you see how that looks. Again, there could be situations where that's appropriate. So a line chart without lines maybe sounds like a contradiction, but a line chart could consist of points like this. That is a bit unusual, so I'll press Control-Z a few times to go back to the previous settings. There we are. So we've got a smooth lined option for each of the lines here in this chart. And as I close the dialog box, we've also got some data off to the right. And here's something to be watchful for when you're creating line charts. Each of these charts, the 3 yellow charts that we see here, and I'll zoom back slightly, holding down Control and moving the mouse wheel. Each of these 3 charts to the right, the 3 with the yellow backgrounds, are based on the data up above. And they're all showing the same data. So as I click this chart here on the left, you see the data being highlighted. I click the chart to the right, it's the same data, and the chart below that. But based on the shape of the chart itself, I think you can see we're reading a different story here, aren't we? Are domestic sales going up as we see in the lower chart, but not that much? We could read it that way. Sure, we can read the numbers. This looks like it's 80 or 75 or something like that. This one's not quite 200. The numbers are actually 80 and 180. Look at the chart above it. That's a more typical look in terms of height and width. One to the left is awfully narrow. We're looking at the same data in all cases, and it's just a question of taking a chart and pointing to its upper right-hand corner and making it wider or making it taller or taking it back to where it was. So anytime you work with line charts, if you're watching another chart, say in a presentation, and you see a line chart that's unusually wide or unusually tall, you might give some thought as to what is going on here. Now, you could be a little bit devious sounding if you called this creativity here, or is it distortion? What are we talking about here? But the point is, you can make line charts come up with a different connotation just by changing their shape. Something else you could do too, if you wanted to accentuate this, in the narrow chart to the left, if you double-click one of the axis options, and you might have seen this in another movie, we could change the minimum there to be 80, since that's the starting point. And as I click on the maximum panel, watch that chart to the left. It looks even steeper now. And I could change the maximum to be 180. It's going to be steeper again as we look at that. So we're not suggesting you should be devious at all, but do recognize as we're working with certain kinds of line charts, we see these variations. Now, you do have the right with any chart, and I do strongly recommend this with column charts, that anytime you create a column chart, consider switching row column. With line charts, usually there's a clear option where one is better than the other. When you switch row column, look what happens here. Not at all acceptable. In the green chart over here, same idea. Switch row column, you see what's happening. data doesn't typically flow across regions. So a switch row column, although advisable, and it's not hurting to try it here, is something we consider with all chart types. But in line charts, I think it's pretty apparent. Nearly always you want to be talking about a time frame across the bottom. And line charts are frequently used, charts that we see all the time. We see them on television, we see them in newspapers, magazines, and so on. So it's one of the most commonly used chart types in Excel. But do remember, when you are sizing a chart, if you're dragging from the corners or even from the sides, you will get a different feel of the data based on the ratio of height to width as you manipulate the size of the charts.